not too far into the future that these platforms are accessible. But then the other half of it is how could we also use it to make whatever accessible to people that might not be able to do certain things or do them in the same way. Again, physical access to places, and there's many reasons people don't have access to places, but right now we're all kind of stuck at home, and this is a great example of, well, you can in theory go anywhere around the world now without having to leave your house. That's something that many people can't have. They have that issue even without COVID-19, right? And so thinking of ways of using this technology to open up information and participation to a larger group, I'd say is the other half of what we can do with XR Access. The primary goal being, well, we need to make it accessible first before we do that. Then once we do it, this is, again, like the internet, it opens up a whole new world of connection that we never had before, and problems, right? And we think about that too, but it kind of opens up the aperture to be able to do a lot more than we've ever been able to do.
Just adding to that, it's not just about being able to access something remotely, as a lot of us are doing now. But let's say you're using augmented reality and you're a person that's deaf or hard of hearing. You might be able to put on a transparent headset in a meeting, in a augmented reality meeting, and be able to see real-time captioning. So it's just things like that as well. People to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Right, but if people with disabilities can't actually get these things up and running out of the box without outside help, then that's really limiting the power that this technology can really offer in the long term.
We're ready for the next slide,
here.
So I think here we can talk about inclusive design. You guys want to kind of give an overview of what that means?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do want to be cognizant of our time here, because I do think we're starting to run a little short. But yeah, I think it's important for everybody here to make sure they, whether you're a designer or a teacher or just anybody else in the process, that when you're designing, you don't just design for yourself, but you design to be inclusive of others whose people's experiences and capabilities are different than your own, right? And that's a really challenging task that asks a lot of empathy out of our educators, out of our technology workers, and everybody else that's involved with bringing these technologies and applications to fruition. But it's one that ends up with great dividends when everybody can use it.
Slide up.
All right. This is amazing. Are you ready for some questions?
Let's do it.
Yeah, I think based on the time, I think, yeah, it seems good.
Well, we have 30 minutes, so we've got time. So I have some right off the bat. So if you thank you, first of all, and for those that came in, we're talking about accessibility as relates to XR and some of the challenges that have been faced with not only the self-isolation access and to tools and resources, but also dealing with those with that are differently able, disabled, whatever the politically correct term is, because I don't think there's anybody who's disabled. We just differently abled here. So I have 1,000 questions, but if you have a question, please hit the raise hand button that's down in the lower screen. My first question is, are there standards out yet for dealing with AR? Because we have very different technologies. AR and VR are very different, and then there's mixed reality, which is a whole nother ball of wax. Are there any standards, guidelines that are out yet? Or is it just an extension of the poor standards, the perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust, with the web accessibility laws? Are there standards, and where can we find them?
I think those are definitely under development. A lot of the standard guidelines in terms of the WCAG guidelines and the ones you mentioned do still apply. In terms of ones that are specific to XR, I know we have our guidelines, practices, policies group working on wrangling some. I know as well that the W3C, I believe, put out a call for feedback essentially on some XR accessibility requirements. So those are kind of in draft form and still, being perfected. But there's definitely a lot of folks trying to get those all in one place so that people who are, have the motive and the desire to make accessible technology have reliable guidelines to work from.
Do you have links to those on your website or somewhere to at least start that process?
So we have a working group page on our website. If you go to, it's just www.xraccess.org. We have a page that talks about the specific working groups, one of which is the Guidelines, Policies, and Practices group that Dylan mentioned, which is actually led by Bill Curtis Davidson, who works for Magic Leap. So they're working on exploring what does exist to figure out what we need to create. And I think that's a lot, if I'm understanding correctly.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right, let's see. Keely, you're out there. Hey, Keely, you have a question.
Yes, hello. I just want to say thank you for holding this event. And I was actually wondering if any of you are addressing maybe accessibility on the socioeconomic side of things, like people who may not have the hardware or aspects like that. And how are you guys addressing it?
So that's not something we've focused on yet. We are still in pretty much what are the early stages. I think we really launched this work in September and have really been focused on building up what the working groups are doing, but also we are also focusing on research and education as well. So we're trying to determine right now what our focus areas are. And it's definitely something we're thinking about. I met with a woman, Kai, she runs Kai XR, and she's a former teacher and talks a lot about, students in Title I schools in particular not having access to these devices. So it's definitely on our radar, and we do have an education working group, and this is a great thing to bring to them and talk about exploring that. And everybody in this room and educators in general are welcome to, if you're interested in joining XR Access and the education group specifically, you can reach out to us. That's our email address up there, and I'm really the one that gets those emails, so it's really Devin at XR Access.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Keely.
Yeah, and I will just add to that as well that I think part of what we can do for that is make sure that any guidelines and things that we do put out, any tools that are helpful with that, run on all types of hardware, right? Ideally from the Google Cardboard on up to the high-powered tethered machines. Because accessibility that's only on the super high-end, multi-$1,000 machines is accessibility for people that may not have needed it as much to begin with, right? There's lots of people at that intersectionality of socioeconomic and disability, physical disability, that we want to make sure these guidelines will apply to and help out.
Excellent, because there's democratizing and then there's accessibility, and those are often overlap, right?
Right.
And Joel, you were going to say, and then Daniel's got a question too.
Well, from my group as the hardware group, I think this is something that will likely fit into that as we're looking at current platforms, but sort of that next generation of platforms. And again, are these companies thinking about, and I know they're already trying to make them less expensive. There's still a point where if it costs anything, it's going to be an issue for a large group. But it fits into hardware. Like, what kind of hardware can it run on? Can it actually, like this platform, for example, can run on a laptop, right? And so there's ways of connecting it even if you don't have a headset, and that actually is part of the solution where, yes, get less expensive devices. Can we seed devices? Can we repurpose devices? Or can we also make it work if you don't have a device? And, it kind of touches all our different areas, but it's something I'm very keenly aware of, not only for reasons like this, but even in my job, we have this issue with our customers. They can't buy everybody a $3,000 VR headset setup, and we want to allow them to be able to use this more too. So I think solving this for that will also solve it in part for the question that Keely asked.
Excellent. Yeah, that's part of the reason why we chose AltSpace as kind of as a home base right now, is because of that access for as many devices as possible. So yeah, love that. Daniel, you have a question?
Oh, I have lots of questions.
I know.
First of all,
boiling over too.
always have lots of questions. Thank you, first of all, so much for sharing with us the work you're doing, and I'm relieved that somebody is out there looking out for this, because there's so much work needs doing, and I think we would love to do more accessibility work. Knowing you're out there doing it, we can collaborate with you now, and in particular, I really wanted to just ask if anybody here in the room has a very particular question or a challenge or a learner who they need accessibility solutions for, or a situation like that. Can they reach out to you? Is it you, Devin, that email, info@access.org?
Yes,
And-
they can reach
and-
out to me.
Wonderful. And do you have a remit for interacting with schools, universities, colleges, that kind of thing, with educators? Is that part of what you set out to do?
Say that again, Daniel. I didn't hear the first part.
Sure. Do you have kind of a semi-official remit for interacting and engaging with education, teachers, trainers, schools, and so on? Is that part of your mission?
We don't at the moment, but the education group in particular is still in its nascent stages. So we're trying to define
Right.
what that looks like. So, we
Okay.
welcome your ideas, bring them to the table.
Wonderful, fantastic. And then I kind of a follow-on from that. You must be aware of WebXR. That's something personally I'm very excited about. So platforms like this, you download them and they run on various devices, but WebXR runs on the internet, on the web, and that makes it one step less of a barrier to entry. Is that something you're focusing on as well? And maybe Joel, I think that would be your area.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something we part of this, right? Is the platform, right? And
Right.
the issue now is that all these, not only you have to download applications, but there's different platforms for Steam versus Oculus versus
Right.
whatever else, and that, like you said, that helps bridge all of those. And again, even
Yes.
people that don't have a headset. So that's part of this as well.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. All right, wonderful. All right, thank you, Daniel. Okay, Raven, thank you for your patience. You're up. And anyone else, if you have a question, please hit the raise hand button down the lower right corner. Raven, you're on.
Thank you. First, I wanted to say thank you so much for this presentation and the work that you're doing. I'm really excited to go look at your website. I have, I guess, sort of a two-part question, and it has to do with representation in VR and in AR. So one of the students who works in my VR AR lab, one of her first encounters with VR was actually creating her AltSpace avatar. And this particular student wears a hijab and realized that she could not create an avatar that looked like her because there was no option for her to have a hijab. And also in a lot of games, like this is not special to VR, but here we are in AltSpace and we're all standing skinny people and or robots. Although some of the robots maybe are a little bit less skinny, but there's such limits on representation in a world that we can build anything we want. And so I'm wondering if your group is taking a look at just representation in experiences of people with disabilities, of people, who just span the broad intersectionality that we are in the real world. That's part one of my question.
Okay. All right, let me respond to the first part of it. AltSpace right now is all the avatars are placeholder avatars, so they are specifically, this technologically dumbed down, optimized down to the lowest level. So these are not respective of normal avatars. Right now, AltSpace is in remodel, so that's why there's no customization. We all have the same body type and limited robots. So just just qualification for AltSpace right now. And did you want to have that addressed first and then your second question?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So how are you dealing with avatars, presence, embodiment, and that part?
Yeah, I think I could speak to that. I want to say, first of all, that you're absolutely right, that things like representation, as well as economic accessibility and social stigma of using headsets are all absolutely parts of accessibility. I think they are certainly important. I think it's something that we have tried to support where we can. That said, I think our efforts right now are kind of based on more of the technical requirements that are going into the construction of these than the kind of avatar and the representation requirements, because I think those are a lot harder to express on a kind of that platform and that broad level. But it's absolutely something that I think we would encourage any designers, any developers to include as part of making their game accessible. So I think it will definitely make it into any types of guidelines and things that we put out. And as well as what things like customizability, right? Let people customize and put in their own avatars, and let people especially make sure that the tools for creation are accessible to everybody, to people with disabilities, to people with socioeconomically disadvantaged, but only once we have people not only as consumers but as full-on creators, I think we're really going to see a lot of these accessibility issues kind of quashed for good.
I would say one of the things we hope to get out of XR Access is to definitely spur dialogue on the importance of making sure XR is accessible. So I think, the more we can all talk about, even the people in the audience, the more we can talk about these accessibility issues publicly on social media with our fellow educators, I think that's really important. There's actually a hashtag, if you're on Twitter, there's a hashtag that people use on Twitter and LinkedIn. It's hashtag A11Y, and that sort of brings you into the accessibility conversation as it relates to technology. I think bringing up conversations like that, making sure people see that is a component of the need is important.
Excellent. Are you ready for part 2, David?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Yes. Thank you so much for those answers. So part 2, I'm curious to what extent, maybe not particular to your organization, but just in terms of developers out there who are creating VR, AR, XR applications and tools and hardware, to what extent are those people explicitly looking for individuals with disabilities or with differences to serve in development and in leadership roles in those organizations? And to what extent are those people involved in the design process way beyond test this, or are compensated for their feedback?
Well,
Sorry, I was going to say, my audio cut off for part of your question there, so I apologize for that. But was it basically asking how the folks with disabilities that we'd have to take part in things like user testing are compensated for their efforts?
And the
compensated
inclusion.
or yeah, thanks, Rael.
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. There. So are they being included in the decision-making process, the feedback process, and compensated through that process as well?
Right. Yeah, that's a really great question, because I think it definitely goes back again to making sure that for folks with disabilities, all of these products are made with them and not just kind of designed with them and not just designed at them, right? I think we've definitely been trying to, as much as possible, bring in people and organizations that have disabilities into XR Access and get their feedback on these types of things. I think for us, we're all, for the most part, nonprofit. I don't think any of us are paid. So it's the compensation is the same as we're getting in terms of making sure that their voices are heard. I think it's definitely something that is part of the guidelines that we want to put out is, again, do user testing with people with disabilities and pay them. Right? Absolutely, you ask for something like that for free. And so getting proper compensation for those, all your user testers is something that I think is absolutely vital.
And I
Devin,
can
would you
just
like to
add
add
to
on to that?
Sure, I can just add that XR Access, the members of XR Access, there are a lot of people with disabilities that are part of it, including myself. So that has come up in conversation a lot. And I think people are keeping that in mind as we push our work forward, and we'll continue to make sure with anything we're working on, even if it's a research project, it's, whatever, that we have multiple perspectives in the conversation.
Excellent. So with that in mind, as a follow-up question to what Raven mentioned, are there tools available that help those that do not have those different abilities to actually experience that? Now, I know there's some apps, but I was wondering what you would recommend for people who are in development to actually see what that experience is like, or to hear what that experience, or to feel what that experience is like.
Hey guys, have you seen, I'm just talking to my fellow panelists, Global Accessibility Awareness Day? That is coming up May, I want to say 21st, but don't, quote me on that. But I believe on their website they have ways you can sort of experience that. They have suggestions of how you can put yourself into that situation. So if you want to check out, if you just Google Global Accessibility Awareness Day, you should find the information there.
Well, those mostly apply to web-based technologies. Do they have XR listed in there?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I don't know, actually.
I will say, I think you do have to be very careful when you simulate a disability to be assuming that you now have the experience of someone who has that disability, right? Because putting on a blindfold for 10
Absolutely.
minutes is extremely different from being
Very
blind
much
for 10
so.
years.
Yes.
And so I think from my experience, and let me know if y'all feel differently, but I think it's you can definitely try out some of these things that purport to give you the experience of someone who has a disability, and that can be useful for things like just as a kind of a brainstorming exercise, design exercise, like I just realized this isn't going to work unless you can see, or this isn't going to work unless you have two hands. But when it comes to actually learning what it's like to have a disability, listen to people with disabilities. That's
Absolutely.
the only way to do it. Listen to their lived experiences. Because simply trying to simulate it is never going to give you their lived experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I was also thinking of the empathy angle, but excellent advice. All right, so let's see. Who else do we have on the list here? Aaron, you're next.
Yeah, Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, so I'm sort of just wondering, is there any sort of tools like on the developer side on like help with implementing like tools to make sort of in my case I'm studying games design, so we're making VR games in the future. So is there any tools that sort of help, I guess, with implementing accessibility into games? Because I see if you're trying to make like a game accessible to like colorblind, as well as being able to be played with one hand, as well as being able to be accessible for a lot of people, then it's going to add like a lot of work, especially if you're working in like a small team, like in terms of actually implementing it.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. The answer is definitely yes. There are certainly a lot of tools on the developer side to make things more accessible, which is great because it's really the developer side where that needs to happen. And I think if it's something that as a developer you're thinking about from the start, and you have the right resources, which is something we're looking to help provide, it becomes a lot easier to just have accessibility be in there. To answer your question, I think there's definitely a goodly number of Unity plugins that you can just basically drop in and attach to, if you're working in Unity, attach to objects to do things like make them screen reader accessible. If you're looking on OpenXR, there's things like alternate, the image tag equivalent, but alt text, but for 3D objects. know we are putting together a list of those. I'm sure that there are some that we could put on the website as well, but absolutely, I think there are resources out there, and I think soon we will have a list of those. And in the meantime, if you can tell us, from your perspective, and not necessarily right this instant, but for anybody who's a developer, if you want to reach out to us and tell us what's going to be useful to you, we will make sure that our list of resources include that as well.
All right, okay.
Yeah, and by the way, this goes to the fact that we don't have all the answers right now. There are, as Dylan mentioned, there's resources out there. Various groups have put together bits and pieces. There's Unity plugins. There's work that W3C is doing. There's guidance out there. Our goal is to bring that together, come up with an easier way to reference all of that, and then also fill some of the gap, because we know there's some gap, and make it easier for you. So right now, the short answer is yes, there are resources out there. The long answer is it needs to be better, which is why we're here.
All right. That's beautiful. Now, I have a question, and then Daniel, and then anyone else, if you have a question, please hit the raise hand button. You've talked about some add-on capabilities. So I want to talk about AltSpace for just a second, because I know there's accessibility challenges that are here. This is built with Unity. So are you aware of anything that supports Unity, can be added on through Unity, through the engine and whatnot, that will add like captioning or high contrast influencers or anything like that may or may not be able to be overlaid into something like AltSpace, which is Unity based? There are some proprietary stuff, but it is basically Unity based, or other Unity based products, or just in general.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but I do know that if you look in the Unity store, there's definitely several that can improve with things like letting you add alternate image tags, letting you insert things like visual adjustments for people with color blindness, or we have somebody in the application accessibility group who developed a plugin for people with ocular degeneration. It can you attach it to your cameras and it can warp the view, so to help accommodate for that. So those are definitely out there. As Joel mentioned, I'm afraid we're not quite at the level where we have those kind of at the drop of a hat. But it is a list that we are trying to put together, and once we have it, we will absolutely share it out.
Fantastic, wonderful. I do know that Second Life is working on adding simultaneous captioning, and one time AltSpace was working on it as well, but they lost funding. But I would love to see those things be added right in to the process. And Joel, what were you going to add?
Well, so I was going to say, this is the goal. Is what we want to do is, and from my perspective of the hardware, even the platforms like the operating systems, this is the kind of thing that is built into Windows and Mac and iOS and Android that allows those platforms to have these features that then can be turned on in apps that are built the right way. That doesn't really exist in the AR/VR space right now. So there's no easy answer. Often it might be a plugin that you have to actually then bake into the application itself. It's not necessarily a plugin that you can just turn on for AltSpace, but that's the dream. And so we need to figure out how to get there where you can just say, hey, I have a specific need in AltSpace. This plugin is standard across Unity apps. It enables, this feature, and it solves your issue with just a click of a button or whatever. So as far as I know, we're not really there yet. Dello must have something out there that I haven't seen, but that's where we want to go.
All right. Well, we only have a few more minutes left because we are unfortunately running up against another event. But I want to get to another. I have so many questions. I would like to invite you all to have us do an Educators in VR. Come back and let's do some Educators in VR events that deal with this more specifically to help address people's. Don't you want to hear more about this? Yeah. And now you've got the practice. We need to get you going out again. Well, all right, Daniel, let me finish my sentence, then you can ask, and then
Sure.
we'll close it out because we are. So so I just want people to know that we do have another event that's after this. We're going to have a portal that's going to go to that event when the doors open. But if you want to continue this conversation, please stay here. You'll be unmuted and you can keep the conversation going here as well. We just have a lot of events back to back. Daniel, you're on.
Thank you very much. Right, so I'm just going to jump up here if I may. Again, thank you so much. While I was listening to you talking about, I think, who was it at the front here? Somebody was asking they're studying game design. Are there any implementation resources? I wondered, if I'm not mistaken, you're working with quite an array of companies. On your website is like the 140, I don't know if it's partners or collaborators or something like that. I just wonder, with all that kind of backing and interest behind you, could there be scope for like an incentive to developers? Could you create some kind of a competition or some kind of an incentive whereby you invite, because there are so many amazing people out there developing with ideas in this, and they might not pursue it. They might have an idea and kind of let it lie. But if you can wake them up and kind of bring them together around a cause, some kind of competition or some grant or funding scheme, could you harness some of that potential to really accelerate and boost the efforts in that area? Just a thought.
I love that idea. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great plan. I think something that we had, considered at one point was a, XR Access stamp of approval or something, or if you are guaranteed, if you passes all of these requirements, then maybe it gets featured, or we can help promote, the designers and developers that have taken the time and effort to make their applications fully accessible. I think that's something that I would like to see in the long term, and I think something that, as you said, there's part of the big challenge here is, XR Access, we want to help give everybody the information on how to make their apps accessible, but they still need to want to make them accessible, right?
Right.
And that's a challenge that absolutely we can't solve alone.
Right.
I think it's something that is going to take, nonprofits, it's going to take the companies, it's going to take governments, and it's going to take people and individuals and educators, everybody pushing to say, I'm not going to use this application unless it is accessible to everybody.
Right, and that's been very much our approach here with the community, is to harness the resources together, and the number of wonderful projects that have resulted out of just having people in the same room and a conversation starting here or on the Discord server. That's what we live for, to see people with ideas go off and do good things, and just give them the platform to come together and have that spark. So yeah,
I would love that.
We'd love to have you back, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and have more intimate discussions about this. So I'd like to, as we start to close this out, because we do have the other event, but please stay here. The conversation will, Daniel, the conversation will be open, and but I do want to say to all of you, in our thanks and appreciation, when the Sydney Olympics were sued because their website was not accessible, the court said one of the most profound things that I just loved. The battle was, well, we can't fix it. For the Olympics Committee to make our website fix it, it would be too expensive and take too long. And the court responded back, if you'd done it right in the first place, it would not have cost so much and it would not take any time. And the problem we have right now that you are helping to solve, but we need it 5 years ago, so we're 100% supportive, is that we need to know how to do it right in the first place and going forward. So thank you for being the leaders in helping us get to that right place, whatever that means and however that looks. So everybody, give them up for some great loving and heart and applauding for helping us get to the right place. And so that we can make sure that when we say it's inclusive, yes.
Managed to make it back in well.
You made it in, good, thank you.
Yes, I did.
All right. Okay, so thank you. All right, the audio.
So much, guys.
Thank you. I'm gonna come out here to the audience, and it's not to steal thunder. Anyone who wants to stay, please stay. But I'm gonna throw up a portal to the next event, which is the Daniel, could you tell them about it while I'm looking for it? Daniel, are you here?